Hey everyone, welcome to Steven Universe, the show where we talk about the universe of Steven Universe. I'm your host, Victor Frost. First things first, the news. How sweet it is. The smell of fresh episodes. Well, apart from the hiatus being over, there isn't much news, but for those of you out there who don't have Google Alerts and web crawlers scouring the web for Steven U info, Steven Universe was nominated for Outstanding Short Format Animated Program this year at the Academy Awards, also known as the Emmys, for the episode Lion 3 Straight to Video. Unfortunately, it didn't win, losing to Adventure Time's episode Jake the Brick. It might also be of note for you to know that next week's episode has been announced and is on the schedule. In Sadie's song, Steven is going to be helping, you guessed it, Sadie prepare for a performance during Beachapalooza. You can catch that Thursday, September 17th at 5:30 p.m. Eastern and Pacific, only on Cartoon Network. Now let's see what you folks have been up to. It's time for a review. Story for Pearl by Swedish artist Yamio is an illustrated poem that tells the story of Pearl's relationship with Rose, and how her assumptions about it changed over time. Deeply saturated, its vibrancy and use of color to communicate not just characters, but emotions and change makes it a spectacularly beautiful piece. The character drawings themselves, while not 100% on model, shows a deep level of personality and nuance. The artist also displays an awareness of her medium, clearly drawing this with Tumblr's vertical display format in mind and using it as a means to naturally guide the audience through the narrative. So, what's the verdict? I'm gonna give it 4 out of 5 Stevens. While it's a very good piece, it is not without its faults. The colors chosen for the text, while creatively used to indicate the characters, are far too bright for the white background, making it hard to read at times. Considering the poem contextualizes the art as much as the art illustrates the poem, this is a pretty big hang-up. Also, while I love me some Pearl, her love of Rose is a topic that's been done to death, especially the angle used here. It's a compelling story, I know, but I really wish there would be some new ground broken every once in a while. That being said, it's a good piece, and you should definitely go check it out. Link in the doobly-doo. Now it's time for us to look at the latest episode and see what we learned. If you haven't yet seen the episode, Nightmare Hospital, this is your chance to pause this video, go watch that one, then come back. Don't worry, we'll wait. This is your spoiler alert. New episode, new lore. Let's see what we learned. Since the very beginning of Connie's involvement in Steven's universe, she has been exposed to all manner of magic and beasties. Protective bubbles, gem monsters, portal-making intelligent lions, and oh, let's not forget the trio of non-organic, immortal, shape-shifting aliens who have taken up residence in the peninsula, now known as Beach City, and are presently raising a human-alien hybrid known as Steven. Yes, it is a strange world, but that's the reality of it. Though most people who live in that world probably don't see it that way. The ticket lady at the movie theater was just as disturbed by the havoc caused by the floating head training thing as any of us would be. Lars flat out mocks the existence of magic, and Greg, despite being one of the few humans who have a deep knowledge of the gems, is still regularly surprised by what happens in the show. When it comes to life with the gems in the context of human life in general, it's pretty clear that the quo is pretty far from status. However, the fact that people, as far as we know, are unfamiliar with these very present and very global phenomena doesn't make the fact of the situation any less real. It doesn't matter if people's perception doesn't align with reality, because reality is reality all the same. And that's the central conflict of this episode. Perception versus reality. Okay, so maybe it's a bit too early in the video to hit the big summary just yet. Let's back up a bit. The central character conflict in this episode takes place between Connie and her mother, Dr. Priyanka Maheshwaran. As far as we know, Dr. Maheshwaran is a strict, rules-oriented person who's scheduled her daughter's life to the minute, with any deviation scolded. Connie, on the other hand, is secretly engaging in behavior that she knows is risky and would completely horrify her parents. Now, as much as many people could easily make arguments that both of them are wrong, Connie in her disobedience and Priyanka in her overbearingness, it's just as easy to make the argument that both of their actions are understandable and just. Dr. and presumably Mr. Maheshwaran as well only made such a strict array of rules and activities, the violin lessons, tennis practice, study sessions, etc., in order to ensure that Connie grew up to be an intelligent and well-balanced individual, as well as to ensure her safety.
We Maheshwarans are all about safety.
Connie, on the other hand, having had her creativity enriched so through her constant exposure to the arts, the violin lessons, books, and classical music, for examples, felt stifled in the risk-free, inflexible life her parents had architected for her. Her living a double life wasn't a malicious affront to her parents, it was an attempt to exercise some autonomy over her own person, a natural desire for all kids growing up. Knowing her parents' immediate reaction to her activities would probably be to buy a bigger abacus, she hid that part of her life from them, not wanting to lose the autonomy and adventure she so craved but knew was inaccessible under her parents' rules. This was the beginning of the divergence between the reality of Connie's self and her parents' perception of her. This divergence is manifested through her secret identity, specifically through her glasses. When she was being her authentic self, the glasses are off. She doesn't need them, so she doesn't wear them. When she's interacting with her parents, however, even on the phone, the glasses go on because they are a part of Connie as her parents perceive her. It's actually really important that the glasses do go on because that's the only physical difference between her authentic self and her performative self. If she ever forgets to wear her glasses when dealing with her parents, it would be a clear and obvious indicator that something is different and thus prompt an investigation on their part. So, making sure she wears the glasses is imperative to maintain the deception and, thus, her newfound liberty. Connie maintains this deception so well that Dr. Maheshwaran is 100% unflappable in her belief that her perception of Connie is reality. The very idea of Connie being a swordswoman or having participated in any activity outside of her knowledge isn't just ridiculous, it's impossible. That is, until Connie drops her deception, takes off the glasses, and lets her mother see her new, authentic self for the very first time. Confronted by the reality of Connie's authentic self, a reality that is mutually exclusive with her perception of Connie up until this point, Priyanka is initially stunned. Justifiably so, she is suffering a partial worldview collapse after all. But in the end, she opens up and accepts this new, true reality. The idea of perception clashing with reality is very much a repeating theme in this show. The Gems think that Rose wouldn't trust Greg with the laser light cannon, but she did. The weird things in Beach City isn't what Ronaldo thinks they are. Rose didn't share everything with Pearl. Those are just a few examples, but there are a ton more. In fact, if I were to make a prediction, which I guess I kinda am right now, I would say that there is a pretty good chance that when the Earth is in more risk than usual, the Gems will learn something about Rose that fundamentally shakes their perception of her. At least, for a little while. Ooh, I'm taking a risk with this one, aren't I? This perception versus reality idea also reminds me of Plato's allegory of the cave, which is, to be honest, a bit more complicated than I really want to get into right now, but there is a link in the description to a video by the folks over at 8-Bit Philosophy that does a great job of explaining it. In this case, Dr. Maheshwaran's perception of Connie is the shadow on the cave wall, and Connie's authentic self is the object casting the shadow. The perception that Priyanka and Mr. Maheshwaran had of Connie is very much analogous to the perception of the world most of the human denizens of the show like to share. As far as they know, everything is more or less normal, and it would take a similarly earth-shaking event, perhaps literally, to get them to realize that the reality of the world is very, very different, however unwilling they may be to accept it. But in the end, it doesn't matter if people's perceptions don't align with reality, because reality is reality all the same. And that's the central conflict of this episode. Perception versus reality. And that's what we learned this time on Steven Universe Universe. Join us next week as we look at the episode Sadie's Song. That will be our 36th episode. With that, I'm Victor Frost, and I'll see you next time on Steven Universe Universe.